Welcome back, wrestling WWE fans. Tonight's story takes us to the City of Lights, where John Cena stood in the middle of a Paris arena and gave what may have been one of the most emotional moments of his career. The legendary icon, the face of WWE through so many eras, looked around at a sea of fans and uttered the words that broke hearts worldwide: "Au revoir, France." But as with all things in WWE, what should have been a moment of celebration and farewell quickly twisted into something darker. Please like, share and subscribe for more WWE content. Cena came to Paris not just to wrestle, but to connect with a crowd that has followed him faithfully for 2 decades. His presence felt like a gift, a chance for fans to say goodbye in person, to salute the man who has carried the company on his back through challenges, triumphs, and controversies. The ovation was thunderous, the kind of roar that shakes a building to its foundation, as if the people of France wanted their gratitude etched into history. But beneath the chants of Cena, there was an undercurrent of tension. Because in WWE, no moment is ever safe from shadow, and no farewell is ever left untouched. The shadow, as always, came in the form of the Bloodline, whose legacy continues to hover over everything, even on nights that should belong to someone else. Their story is one of dominance, of pressure, of silent resentment, and Paris was about to become another chapter. For years, the Bloodline has been the most dominant force in wrestling, a dynasty led by Roman Reigns and fueled by loyalty bound in fear. But power like that comes at a price. Every victory carried whispers, every championship came with sacrifices that weighed heavy on brothers and cousins who often wondered if they were pawns in Roman's reign rather than equals in a family empire. Cena's farewell happened under the same lights where their pressure finally broke. As Cena addressed the crowd, thanking them for their passion and promising that his love for the business will never die, there was a sense of purity in the air. It was wrestling at its most human, at its most vulnerable. Fans leaned in, hanging on every word, every pause, every smile that trembled at the edges. And then, halfway through, the entire tone of the night shattered. Out of nowhere, the arena descended into chaos as the Bloodline made their move. What was supposed to be a farewell turned into a battlefield. The Paris crowd erupted in shock as fists flew, as bodies hit the mat, as John Cena's moment was hijacked by a family imploding before the world. This wasn't just interference. This was betrayal spilling out into the ring, a rebellion that no longer stayed in the shadows. Cena, battered but defiant, tried to fight back, but the sheer force of the ambush overwhelmed even him. The Paris crowd's cheers turned to gasps, then to fury, as the unthinkable unfolded before their eyes. The Bloodline wasn't united. They were tearing at each other, turning on their own as much as on Cena. What was meant to be his goodbye became the stage for the family's implosion. The shocking climax left the audience in stunned silence. Cena lay beaten, his farewell interrupted, while the Bloodline members shouted and fought among themselves. Years of pressure had boiled over, and Paris was the boiling pot. The dynasty that once looked untouchable now looked fractured beyond repair, and it all played out under the farewell lights of a living legend. Backstage, whispers spread like wildfire. Some insiders claimed Roman had lost control of his empire long ago, and Paris was simply the night it all spilled into the open. Others suggested that Cena's farewell triggered emotions in the family, a reminder that legacies can end, and that one day even Roman's aura of invincibility will fade. The truth is, no one knows for sure, but everyone agrees the Bloodline will never be the same. The locker room buzzed with disbelief. Younger stars looked on with wide eyes, realizing they were witnessing history. Veterans shook their heads, muttering about how quickly dominance can crumble when built on fear instead of trust. Paris had become more than a stop on the farewell tour, it became the night WWE's most dominant dynasty cracked in full view of the world. Fans across the globe took to social media, their timelines flooded with disbelief. Clips of Cena thanking the crowd juxtaposed with fists flying and chaos erupting went viral instantly. The emotion of a farewell was hijacked by the violence of betrayal, and the world debated what it all meant for Cena's legacy and for the Bloodline's future. Roman's silence in the aftermath was deafening. No words, no statements, no appearances, just a void that made the betrayal louder. For a man who has always called himself the tribal chief, the silence was a thunderous admission that control had been lost. And for the Bloodline, that silence may be more dangerous than any words could ever be. Cena, ever the consummate professional, later addressed the fans with bruises still visible. He thanked Paris again, his voice steady but his eyes carrying the weight of what had happened. He reminded everyone that WWE has always been bigger than one man, but even he couldn't ignore the tragedy of what had unfolded. His farewell became a warning of what happens when family bonds are consumed by ambition. In the weeks that followed, the whispers turned into predictions. Some believed Roman would retaliate with a vengeance so severe it would either restore his empire or destroy it completely. Others believed the bloodline rebellion would only grow, that the Paris attack was just the opening salvo in a civil war that could reshape WWE forever. Legends of the business spoke somberly about the night. They compared it to dynasties past, to factions that once ruled the company before crumbling under their own arrogance. They knew the signs, they had seen the patterns. To them, Paris was inevitable. It was never a question of if the bloodline would fracture, but when. Younger stars whispered about opportunity. With the bloodline imploding, doors once closed were opening. Championships, main events, legacies, all suddenly within reach for those brave enough to step into the void left by a family at war with itself. But along with opportunity came fear, because a family torn apart fights harder, meaner, and without restraint. Paris became more than a farewell, it became a turning point. Cena's goodbye was overshadowed by betrayal, and yet in that overshadowing lay the truth. Every legacy ends, and even the strongest dynasties eventually fall. The bloodline's implosion was no longer a rumor, it was reality, written in bruises and blood under the Paris lights. The fans who were there will never forget it. They came to cheer a legend, to honor his career, and instead they witnessed history far darker. They left the arena not with smiles but with silence, burdened by the weight of what they had just seen. The echoes of that night will linger for years. The fallout spread beyond WWE. Media outlets worldwide covered the chaos, headlines speaking of Cena's interrupted farewell and the bloodline's implosion in the same breath. The story reached beyond wrestling, into mainstream conversation, proof that betrayal and legacy speak a universal language. And through it all, Cena's farewell remained. Bruised, battered, interrupted, yet still spoken. Au revoir, France, carried with it not just gratitude but sorrow, not just love but loss. For fans, those words will forever be tied to the night betrayal stained the ring. The bloodline now faces an uncertain future. Roman's control is shattered, his family divided, his aura cracked. The dynasty that once felt eternal now feels fragile, as if every appearance could be the next chapter of its collapse. Paris was not the end, but it was the beginning of an ending. Because in WWE, betrayal cuts deeper than steel, and silence speaks louder than cheers. When blood betrays blood, there are no victors, only scars. And Paris will forever be remembered as the night John Cena said goodbye, and the bloodline fell apart under the same lights. The tragedy is not just in the fists thrown, but in the trust broken. Families can heal, but scars remain. In WWE, scars become stories, and stories become legacies. The bloodline's legacy is now one of dominance marred by betrayal, of trust destroyed in front of the world. And so we leave Paris with two memories, the heartfelt goodbye of a legend, and the collapse of a dynasty. One celebrated loyalty and love, the other revealed the fragility of fear and power. Together, they created a night that will echo in WWE history forever. Because when the cheers fade, when the lights dim, and when the curtain falls, what remains is not gold or glory, but betrayal, broken trust, and blood. And that, wrestling fans, is the true legacy of Paris.